If you haven't, very much the same rules of everyone's got a right to express their opinion, and please don't talk over each other, and if you wait your turn to talk, I'll try and make sure that we go around the room in bits. Please be concise and to the point, but make sure that your point is understood there, and we'll try and keep referring back to the task in hand, which is the question on the board there. Check that what is noted down is what you mean. If I write it down, I'll write it down yourself, and I'll check that I understand.
So it's the start of the next section or the end of the last
Start of the next one, yeah. So I'm just running through the housekeeping of please don't talk over other people, and basically that if there's a point which will need following up on, I might need to write your contact details on the back of it so it can be discussed further. I'm Tim. I'm facilitating the workshop. That's about the limit of my expertise. In fact, facilitating workshops is not really my expertise at all, but that's what I'm doing. So, without any further ado, what I'll do is go around the room and just ask everyone to introduce themselves and why they've chosen to sit in here, and then I'll ask these two to give a little bit of talk. First, start with you.
Terry Hegarty, I'm here to get our award for a project for sustainable transport that we were put up for last year. The project has folded, but now I'm coordinator of the Ross of Mull and Iona Community Transport Scheme.
Seems to be well fitted.
My name is Daniel. I'm internship in Scottish Government, and I was seconded here to watch your answers to hear your voice.
Yeah. I'm also on an internship, so we hope to leave this place wiser than we came here.
Yeah. Often the case was correct.
I'm John Wilson. I'm here from Bell Escorial, and my current job title is Community Liaison Executive. So we work a lot with the communities at Doctor Station, pretty new for this franchise, a commitment to have community rural partnerships. So that's working with people in the communities to help enhance both the local community, the station and other community, and getting more people to travel with.
That's a good remit.
I'm Catherine McMinn. I live in the island of Battersea. I'm not representing an organisation here. I've just come to the Parliament of Morbat with the people in Bath and Battersea in my mind being here, but I'm not here. I've come to the transport one because being an islander, we're completely governed by ferries.
Yeah.
My name is Frances Culpin. I work for the Scottish Parliament in their Outreach Services team, and my role is Community Outreach Officer, and I work to support the committees to engage with communities.
I'm Stuart Bell. I'm representing the Ports and District Community Council, but I am also a local authority councillor in the Scottish Borders, where we've got a variety of transport challenges.
Yep.
Roddy Murray, Slate Transport Forum, the Isle of Skye.
I'm David Cannon, Public Affairs Manager at CalMac. It's much to hear what you want to say about this. The challenge for us is that most of the service we provide is set by a contract, not by us.
Yes.
So it's useful just to understand, the opportunity to explain to people what we can and cannot do, because there's a lot of misunderstandings on that.
Roland? My name is Roland Stibben. I run something called the Timber Transport Forum, which is to do with timber lorries and small country roads, and I get to talk for 2 or 3 minutes.
And do you want to stand up and go straight into it, Mrs.
Okay. I'm Heather Cowan from Transport Scotland at the Scottish Government, and I met Rural Action, so I met Amanda and Emma a couple of months ago now, so they asked me to come to the Rural Parliament and to participate in a transport workshop. The topic for the forum was chosen by the Rural Parliament, but it's an area that I've got responsibility for within the Scottish Government. So I think if Mr Ewing had read a bit more of his speech earlier, would have confirmed that the Minister has announced, I know, but it's fine, I can do it. The Minister has announced that we will review the National Transport Strategy. So that's something that my team will take forward to Transport Scotland. And so during that process, we'll obviously want to hear from and engage as many communities, individuals, transport authorities, etc., as many organisations as possible on what the current and future challenges and opportunities are for transport, so that transport can continue to support and contribute, be vital to sustainable economic growth and a fairer, greener, stronger Scotland. What we have currently is a National Transport Strategy that was published in 2006 that, for across all of transport, has one vision for transport, 5 high-level objectives and 3 key strategic outcomes. And those 3 key strategic outcomes are improved journey times and connections, reduced emissions, and improved quality, accessibility and affordability. What was taken forward in 2015-16 was a refresh of the National Transport Strategy, and that largely updated the strategic context but retained that framework. But it also recommended the review of the National Transport Strategy, which ministers have now committed to. And the 2006 strategy, the intention there was it acted as an enabler of economic growth to support businesses, of course, in achieving their local, national and international objectives, and to support communities and connect communities also. So we're starting to shape the review that's been announced by the Minister. I think we see it as a 2 to 3 year process. I think our large-scale engagement will probably be post-May, post the local elections. That makes more sense to me than rushing it between now and March. But starting obviously early engagement such as that today. So interested to hear from you. We announced the review at the Dumfries and Galloway Transport Summit that was held. So that certainly had a rural focus in some of the messages that were coming out of the Dumfries and Galloway Travel Summit. So that will feed in to our process, as well as I'm sure the things that Rural Action feedback both from today and the workshop tomorrow. And the other element that will already feed in is the manifesto from the Rural Parliament, which I know was developed off the back of the Fairer Scotland national conversations. So we envisaged, I think, our post-review that we would have a National Transport Strategy 2 as a working name, which would have the vision and potentially objectives, which will then inform transport investment priorities, policies at a national level, regionally, potentially locally, for the 20-year, circa 20 years looking forward. So there clearly needs to be an evidence-based input to that as well. So the theme of your workshop is what are the rural priorities for rural communities to feed into that. So happy to hear from you today, both in terms of feeding in, but also in terms of how you would like to be involved or how you would like to input to that process over its development as we involve and engage throughout the process. So thank you. I'll be in listening mode and taking away. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've been given a few minutes just to do a provocative rant, I think. But as I say, I work for something called the Timber Transport Forum, and I'll talk a bit about timber and timber haulage later, which might be of interest to people in the Ross of Mull and in the Borders and Slate, all of which have timber lorries. But essentially, my issue is about big timber lorries and small rural roads. And what I want from the National Transport Strategy and its associated National Freight Strategy, which is a sub-element of the existing strategy, is to be a bit more ambitious for rural Scotland and to build us a transport infrastructure network suited for the 21st century rather than an aged infrastructure that we have at the moment. So I'm looking for something that will serve a productive rural economy and critically serve what our land use strategy, we have a land use strategy for how land is used in Scotland, for all sorts of different reasons. And it's part of the climate change bill and land use strategy that doesn't involve infrastructure planning. Very strange. But a little bit of background just about roads and infrastructure. We've got Transport Scotland as the national government that has responsibility for trunk roads and for Calmac ferries and things. 3,600 kilometres of trunk roads. The rest of the road network is run by local authorities, and it's 52,000 kilometres. So you've got 3,600 kilometres national trunk roads, 52,000 kilometres of local roads. And more than half of that, 2/3 of that, 36,000 kilometres is minor C roads and unclassified roads in rural Scotland. So we've got this huge network of tiny wee roads. And 40% of those roads are, according to the road conditions survey, are not in acceptable condition. So 2/3 of our local roads are minor rural roads, and 40% of them are not in acceptable condition. And for some reason or other, we seem to think this is acceptable. It's awful. Shouldn't be allowed. The majority of these minor roads were built in the 1800s, essentially. They were tarred in the early 1900s. They've been surface dressed since, but essentially they're the same roads as were built for horses and carts. And we're now running 44-ton lorries on them and wonder why they don't work. And these are the roads that access rural Scotland's land. How you get to the bits of land that are being worked for all sorts of different things, and to the communities that aren't on trunk roads. So it's where people live, where people work. If we want a 19th century rural economy, we've got the infrastructure for it. We've got 19th century roads, we've got 19th century ports, we've got 19th century rail services, the West Highland Line, North Highland Line, all built in the 1800s, and essentially they're the same lines as we've still got today, and they're very constrained and very limited, especially if you want to try and put freight on them, almost impossible. And we've seemed to have accepted that rural Scotland doesn't need modern infrastructure. We've got enough that will serve the heritage tourism industry. We can just sort of tootle around in a wee car, and that's fine, and that's our ambition for it. But I would like our ambition to be substantially greater than that for some productive economy within rural Scotland. Briefly, timber and forestry to explain my interest in all this. Commercial forests cover 14% of Scotland's land area. In Dumfries and Galloway, in Argyll, parts of Highland Lochaber, for example, we're up to about 30% land cover is commercial forestry. And we're taking out 7.5 million tonnes of timber a year from Scottish forests, which is 1,000 lorry loads a day, coming out of very small rural roads in Scotland. And this proportion of timber is going to increase. Essentially, based on what we've already got and what we've planted, by 2030 we'll be up to 10 million tonnes a year, which will be more than 1,000 lorry loads a day. And it's a big business. Fergus Ewing noted in his talk that the Scottish Government wants to double their planting targets to extend even further the land cover of forestry in Scotland. And there's a reason for it. It's a big business. It's £1 billion DVA per year going into the Scottish economy. If you strip out subsidies, it's bigger than agriculture. It's employing 25,000 people. 19,000 of those are involved in managing, planning, harvesting, hauling, and primary processing forestry in about 30 sawmills across Scotland, mostly rural Scotland. It's rural jobs. It's relatively good wages these days. It's people servicing hydraulic machinery. It's not people digging ditches for the most part. It's rural economy. It's rural employment. It's low carbon manufacturing. It's everything we want. UK, we produce about 1/3 of the timber that the UK uses. We import 2/3. So that's why there's an interest in increasing the market share that's coming from Scottish forests. But for these modern forests, we need modern roads. We don't need 2-lane highways going everywhere, but we need roads that are well drained, they're strong enough to support a lorry, there's passing places so that when you're driving up them in your car and you see a timber lorry, you can go, it's a passing place, rather than go, ah! Which is what most people do. Or you try and pass lorries. Essentially, there's a big issue about the capacity of the roads for freight haulage. We are driving £250,000 lorries. They're beautiful, they're Euro 6 engines, the air that comes out of the exhaust is cleaner than the air that goes in. They're wonderful, state-of-the-art technology. We're driving them on cart tracks. So, my argument is that I want the National Transport Strategy to recognise that there's a really substantial investment required in modernising our infrastructure across rural Scotland. And it's not something that can be left to the local authorities who technically have the duty for these roads. They're struggling merely to maintain them, let alone upgrade them for the 21st century. So, 21st century infrastructure for rural Scotland is my agenda.
Oh, clap, clap, clap. Clap, clap, clap. That was rabble-rousing. I'm roused.
Right, well, I'm glad I won't say that. Right, what I'd planned to do now was to split people into small groups, but with the last group we had quite a few people with observational hats on. Actually, for balance of rooms, quite well spread again. So what worked well last time was talking as a general room. I'm going to do that again. So we've basically got 4 questions to answer, and what we're going to ask people to do, if you see dotted around there's some post-it notes, okay? So what I'd like people to do is try and discuss and answer these questions in order and make notes on post-it notes, which I will stick up there, and then we can go back to them tomorrow and analyse what they are and try and put together. You've got some there, give you some. Have there. Yeah. Okay. So the first question is thinking about the National Transport Strategy. What are the groups and interests that might be affected?
You just wanted to shout out.
Yeah, you can shout out and write it down, and I'll put it up on the board if you would. Don't be shy.
Local authorities, communities, businesses, CalMac, railway, you know.
Yeah. So
everybody in here, really.
So community service
Oh,
providers.
government. Parliament.
Yeah. So I'll write them down then. So communities,
Local authorities.
Transport providers.
Oh, them as well, yeah.
communities, transport providers.
All ears.
That's funny, because when you asked that question, I thought older people, low-wage people that got cars, people in remote areas, and
Yeah,
so
there's
we're
two
thinking-
different ways of looking at
yeah,
it, and actually,
yeah.
can I get you to note those down?
yeah,
Let's
just
say,
you know, people that are trying to get about.
So she started off with older people, which I've also written down.
yeah.
Well, just because I know that a lot of
Write
older
it down as we
people
say.
Yeah, if
are
you would,
using
that saves me trying to write
public
down everything.
transport.
I'm also going to write down students. So that's both school, both school and post-school,
Yes.
because there's specific transport has to be provided for school children in rural areas, and that can be a problem. But also post-school, because young people in their first jobs often have difficulty getting to their first job, and their job choice is often based on what they can, where they can get to.
Entirely,
Yeah.
and that is a problem for people in highlighted in that film earlier.
Yeah. And you were saying low wage.
Well, people who don't necessarily have a car, so, and people going for health care.
That's something which got raised in previous meetings. Healthcare is becoming more centralised and journeys are being enforced on people.
So will I write low wage dash public transport?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking people that don't have cars, that's really what I'm kind of...
Okay,
thinking.
fine,
You know.
if it's captured.
I mean, I was a teacher in a school once that wasn't in a rural area. I was very new to teaching, and when we were doing young children, I was doing a bar chart about the colour of your car. And it said more about me than it did about anything, because most of them didn't have a car. So, you know...
Yeah.
They taught you not to use that as an exercise. But actually, as a teacher, that's amusing, because what I'm increasingly seeing is, I don't know how that's set up, is that the schoolhouse is now lived in by somebody else, because all the teachers in the village come from elsewhere. And increasingly I'm finding teachers do not want to live in the community in which the school
I've
is.
heard that, but in rural areas, in remote areas, you
Yeah,
can't
you still,
avoid that.
okay, that's fine, good.
We may be better put down all the important people that they said to start with. Have you got them?
We've got
The
government,
haulage people and all that.
Government, communities, transport providers, hauliers. That was
Local authorities, businesses, ferry operators, railway companies.
brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm not that quick at writing, unfortunately.
Bus company's just coming.
Bus companies.
No pun intended.
Hopefully it won't.
You wait for ages for a sticker and then...
And then they'll come. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so there we
So
go.
can I ask a question then? Why,
You can.
and I'm going to ask it of you, why are you going to allow Hamley Youth to get away with calling it a national transport strategy? Why aren't you going to call it a national access strategy? Because the implication of transport is that, and we've just put in a whole load of businesses and communities, but cyclists use our roads. And the cyclists can be using the roads because they're wanting transport, or cyclists can be using the road because they're cycling, they're road cyclists, and they're actually racing on the roads. So why aren't you calling it a national transport strategy and not a national access strategy?
Well, it's called a National Transport Strategy Review because we've got an existing National Transport Strategy
Right,
we're
okay.
reviewing. So out of that, I think it's just a working title at the moment,
Okay.
but it's a National Transport Strategy too. It may or may not be a National Transport Strategy.
So could I ask you to put up cyclists?
Cyclists,
Both sporting, recreation, and how would I say, and travel to work.
so commuting and
Commuting and recreation, yeah.
You're on active travel as well.
Yeah.
Word and such.
Okay. Yeah, it's a technicality on the wording, but actually National Transport Strategy could almost be put down as an infrastructure review.
Aye, but it gets us thinking.
But it makes you think of transport
Yeah,
rather than
access.
Or connectivity.
Or connectivity, national
Yes.
connectivity.
so that's right. So
Did you get communities up there?
I did get communities.
That's
as the orange
all right,
one.
that's
Yeah,
the only
yeah.
one that really matters.
I got that there. So.
Have you got employers and employees?
Businesses.
We've got businesses and we've got first-time workers, but employees is not one which just general workers actually kind of got overlooked. So employees, I'll put up there. Anything else before we move on?
That's enough. Next.
Right. I was going to chuck tourists in it, but if
Yeah, you can do
Yeah, right.
stick
Yeah, I
to
think
something.
we're thinking rural Scotland.
Yeah,
not
we'll
just
do it.
We had the head chief of tourism Scotland at the last one.
Sorry,
We haven't got policies and climate change and things like that.
Oh, tree huggers.
Next. You're doing well, Tim.
I'll just ignore these. Right, so my degree was environmental science. My opinions on the time lag between carbon emissions and the effect on the thing sort of means, in my mind, that we're about 500 years too late. But I digress. I didn't say that. Anyway, so what do these groups and interests need from the strategy? So what does the strategy need to give to all of these people we've highlighted above? And we'll put
I would say
environmentalists.
easy access to the transport of choice.
Easy access to transport.
Hopefully the two.
That's the first one.
Joined up thinking, which results in joined up transport.
You could be just looking for words like consultation, but we really need your tentative sensitivity.
I think you need a can-do attitude from everybody involved in delivering.
Right, so it's joined up thinking, can-do attitude, and easy access to transport. So I'm going to put joined up thinking and can-do attitude together as their sort of things, whereas easy access to transport is actually something which needs to be provided to those people above. And I still haven't written environmentalists, so I'm trying to do it. So keep bouncing ideas out, if you have any.
I think connectivity is important. It helps us connect with each other.
Yes, so
It's almost conveyed by joined up thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did say that resulted and joined up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to, this is a nice creative session, so I'm going to be controversial. I lived in the Highlands in the early 1970s when the A9 that we now have was built. We're now going to dual it. And I used to call it...
To keep to its timetable.
Yeah.
And this is a personal experience. Whereas if the train coming in from the big city to the remote place gets there, the ferry will be waiting for a trainload of people and will wait to take it. And actually, it's one of these ones whereby, I mean, my personal thought on it is if a train is delayed by ferry, the train operators should not get fined for running that service late.
Yeah.
And that would actually resolve that issue quite neatly by an integration
Yes,
there.
exactly.
And the ferry operator, so actually trying to get from the Highlands to the city, you've got the dual, you've got the single track road, whereas getting out is a dual carriageway.
I think there's a terrible discussion. We need the same services in the Highlands and Islands as anybody else.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We need the same as anybody else.
But
we had this year, we had our ferry service was decimated this year by Transport Scotland.
Right.
Our ferry was taken away that we've enjoyed for 12 years. A trouble-free service for 12 years. Transport Scotland took it away and replaced it with 3 rubbish vessels.
Yeah, but let me debate that with you, because you have to be careful what you wish for.
I know what I wish for. I know what I wish for.
I know you've got challenges in Slade, but in Easter Ross, one of the risks was that improving connectivity actually undermined local businesses because it became cheaper to bring the bread from the central belt than it was to bake it locally.
Well,
and there's a balance in there.
Well, I can tell you, there's a bakery in Benbecula and it's ultra successful.
Good.
It is not competing. The bread from the south can't even begin to compete with it. And it's the quality of the bread in Easter Ross that's to blame rather than the connectivity.
Well, okay, but let me give me the space to expand the point, because one of the challenges with tourism and connectivity, and I know we need connectivity, but it's not connectivity at any price. Where I live, there's a lot of people who say, let's dual the A1, which runs from Newcastle to Edinburgh, which is fabulous for the people that want to travel from Newcastle to Edinburgh, but it does nothing for the Scottish borders.
Yeah, it would take away the...
Because it'll stop people stopping in the Scottish borders. So there's a conundrum. I believe that there is a need for connectivity, but it's not a connectivity at any price.
Well, I can't agree with you on that one, because the connectivity that I'm talking about is where the ferry arrives at the pier here, and the tourists see the bus, the tail end of the bus leaving off the pier, and the pier staff have to put these people in their cars and rush to get them to their destination.
And that's necessary.
Yeah. Well, it's not a good service. It's not the way that the thing should operate. If we're talking about transport strategy, if we're putting that sort of stuff in it, I mean, let's not bother.
There's something I'm just going to pull out of this from observing actually Heather's speech and then people talking around it, and then the speech again, which really flags something up to me. It's one of the keynote objectives from the policy 10 years ago was to reduce journey times, and they're actually looking at what there is a quality of life issue for people trying to get from Edinburgh to Newcastle and doing it so 15 minutes quicker.
Yeah.
Whereas actually what you're talking about there is not a quality of life issue, it's a basic human right. You need that transport link. It's a vital lifeline service. And actually prioritising quality of life over lifeline services is not acceptable. I think that would be possibly something that that people in rural Scotland experience, and people in the cities would not, or urban Scotland, would overlook and not realise that it is such a serious issue. Is that something which people would agree if I try and write that down? Yeah. So
I think to be clear, I think we need wherever we live in Scotland, we need the same high level and quality of transport service everywhere.
Yeah.
And we mustn't be making distinctions between where people live and what the quality it should be, lower, higher, or middle ranking. I live in a place which is 6 miles from the nearest public transport service. So if I need to use my bus pass, I've got to spend £6 on a taxi, first of all, to get to that bus lane. And that's just one. There's a lot of places like that throughout the Highlands and Islands where if I go to Inverness, I can use my bus pass from door to door. It doesn't cost me a penny. Because I choose to live in Skye, I've got to have a taxi journey costing £6 to get to my destination. So that is something that needs to be, if they want people to continue living in rural areas.
My thinking on this is we do need trunk roads, and we need to be able to get people from towns out to the countryside. But if we focus on servicing rural Scotland from the cities, and we build infrastructure to do that, you're then not building infrastructure for the local economy. And we talk all about local food and local networks and local action groups, but all the transport links are from here to the city, not the infrastructure you might need to bolster and build a rural economy that's sort of functioning locally.
I agree with you. I'm not sure. But I don't know how you're going to capture that. But you're right.
No,
I agree with
I'm
you.
just trying to put that one down. Rural development.
This is the rural parliament. We
Yes.
should be pushing for services for the rural areas, not what suits the cities.
Yes, entirely. And, so I'm just trying to put that down.
But
So-
it's a conflict. There are inherently these aren't actually words. There are inherently conflicting is too strong a word, but there are inherently conflicting objectives between point-to-point interconnectivity and developing the rural economy and point-to-point interconnectivity and servicing the rural economy. It's too long-winded.
I mean, it's one which is very well highlighted by the Health Service, and the fact of the matter that, you know, even if you're on an outlying island, now you're often having to travel into Glasgow for healthcare, treatment and bits like that, and actually having rural areas serviced in rural areas rather than rural areas having to go to the cities.
Exactly.
So it needs to be rural
Centric.
Yeah, rural-centric thinking. Make up words when you can't find them. Rural.
But it's that it was Ronald that was saying it. Roland, isn't it? Yeah. It's that conflict between rural-centric versus urban town interconnectivity.
Yeah. So.
The example in the borders is that in parts of the borders it's easier to get into Edinburgh than get to Peebles, which is the nearest town.
Yeah.
So when there was a proposal to change the court structure, some people in that community said, yeah, well, it's okay, we'll just go to Edinburgh for our court cases. But the local authority was saying, no, they'll be in Peebles. But we can't get to Peebles, even though it was closer. Because they were so keen on making sure that the transport went backwards and forwards to Edinburgh. And that's the challenge in terms of rural-centric.
So what I've written down is rural-centric services and infrastructure over urban interconnectivity.
Yeah, okay.
You need that to get to too, but
yes, yeah.
But that's a bit of a no-brainer. What we need in addition to that is the rural networks.
Which is your point.
Can I make a suggestion as a sort of higher level one?
Yeah.
I think what the strategy needs to do is be more innovative. We need to look at maybe, I think, outside the box a wee bit, rather than just, and I'm sure Transport wouldn't dream of doing this, tinkering it, just updating the existing strategy. But, you know, I go to a lot of transport conferences, and one of the things we hear a lot about is rail freight, making better use of rail freight. The A9 is a really interesting example where, as I understand it, the single tracks going up and down alongside the A9 in a lot of cases don't allow the rail freight that could go there, and if they upgraded the rail, then you wouldn't need the 50 mile an hour speed limit or whatever it is, and you could just spread the load and the burden. And I think there's probably other examples and other kinds of transport where it actually just needs a completely fresh view of what's required. Someone once said to me, one of the challenge with transport, I don't know if it's transport, is that in Scotland we tend to think up the solution and then spend a lot of time justifying that solution. So rather than starting and saying, right, what do the people of the islands, or what do the people of the northeast, what do they really need, what would help them do it, and then doing it, someone said, wouldn't it be great if we could get a train from so-and-so to so-and-so? They go, yeah, that would be great. And then all the effort's done justifying that decision that they've already made, rather than actually stepping back. So I know it's a very kind of high-level-y thing, and for reasons that we obviously, I don't want to get involved in the detail of transport, but I think that that's really what Scotland needs. We've been doing the same thing in the same way. And the gentleman there was talking about 18th century this. I mean, one of the challenges we have with our boats is that they're sailing into ports designed for paddle steamers. The drafts are so shallow that strong winds affect them. And in fact, rather than more boats, there's a lot to be said for spending hundreds of £1 million deepening the harbours.
And that would take traffic off roads on.
Yeah, there's also, but it requires a shift in the way that you think about transport and what needs to be done. There's also a tendency, I think, for people just to want more ferries, more trains, more buses, more of this. But actually, if you apply a more innovative approach, there's ways of addressing these problems that aren't about more. And the other thing you also have to remember about more, and we're very aware of this, is that, you know, the Ferries Review talks about doing lots of extra services, but the government also has a very ambitious emissions target. So how do you match that? Because more that helps people do something actually is then undermining another target. So it just requires different thinking.
I must admit, I think you're right there, and it's sometimes having different approaches to doing things is very naturally opposed in places where change has not happened often for hundreds of years, or very slowly.
Yeah. I have no problem with people reviewing something and then deciding that what we've got is the right thing. What I find difficult is people just doing it because it's the way we've done it. Because in many cases they've forgotten why we do it. Things are done because of some obscure incident or something that happened in 18 whatever, and yet it's just become the received wisdom. So there's no problem in reviewing it and saying, actually, that solution is the best and right solution, let's stick with it, but let's not just stick with it without investigating the options.
Yeah.
I think critically we do need low carbon options.
I think that's
while you were talking, I was thinking about the paradox, having tried to make recycling happen on the Isle of Mull. And you're talking about filling a truck with plastic bottles. If there was a railhead in Glasgow, in Oban, that could receive these things, that would be brilliant. It would save carbon. But by the time you've paid for road transport to get these things away to where they're going to be processed, it's a nonsense. We're sending Coca-Cola cans from Iona and you're chalking up the carbon footprint by recycling them. It's absolutely absurd. CalMac could help us a lot with that by letting us fill capacity on your ferries when they aren't full of paying customers. And CalMac could help us a lot by having a community notice board that we didn't have to pay for, so you can advertise to the complete cross-section of people using your ferries. You've got one on the Lismore ferry.
There should be a community board in every ferry.
There certainly should. Take that to the board.
Well, no, when I say should, I mean should. There is my understanding, but I can check. I will take that back.
Yeah, so
I must admit, my understanding on ferry advertising, and
advertising is different.
Is a different thing there, but
yeah, my understanding is every ferry should have a community board. You have to watch about it being abused, because you then get somebody saying, "Well, I paid for this."
Well, we'll give it to the purser.
But certainly for charity things and all that, there's, as far as I'm aware, there is a board on every boat.
Not on the Isle of Mull ferry. And the other thing that I wanted to take the opportunity to say was rethinking policies. When you say road equivalent tariff, got to do it. Government says we put it off for long enough. And the net result of it is that our price of a loaf of bread or a pint of milk hasn't changed in our local shops, because our local shopkeepers aren't allowed to benefit from reduced tariffs. But what does happen is that everybody takes their car off island to do a run round Tesco's. And that actually works really badly for the local shopkeepers. Or, because there's no surcharge on camper vans who run round Tesco's before they come to the island, they're chock-a-blocking our roads and they're not giving us the economic benefits. So imploring that once CalMac's got its policies in place, to review them and say, could we do this better?
Can I just clarify, RET is a government policy, we're applying it.
I'd take full advantage of parliamentarian observers and government.
We're applying a government policy, and I think most people accept there have been some unintended consequences of it, and I'm sure Transport Scotland are working on that as we speak.
Convoy of 24 cars with
Heidi, you've got it sorted. You've got the,
Well, something
Heidi,
I
you've got the camper
say,
van
Collinsy
sorted.
as well, you need permits,
Yeah.
there's various people
Because when
there.
you go onto CalMac website,
You have to
well,
get
I'm in
permission.
Barra, I came back one day through Tyree and you can't book online if you're getting a camper
Although
van,
just, I
which
mean,
is great.
yeah, I mean,
You
it's
should
not
all
for
have
me.
that.
It's not for me to defend all of these things, but you also have to bear in mind that one of the biggest challenges in the network is accommodation, and that you can't really blame people who want to come to the islands and can't get accommodation for bringing their own. But
No.
but that's then a separate.
But what
that's
the
a separate issue.
gentleman's saying is you can't blame them if they go around Tesco before they come and don't spend a penny once
No,
they get
indeed.
to the island.
Well, reduce our reliance on tourism as an industry and build local economies that have other things in them than empty bed and breakfast and holiday homes.
One interesting point on this, though, and it's one which I've observed a good few times, is for actually educating non-rural people that when they come to rural areas, these are the rules of the road, single track roads. If you've got a car behind you who's quicker and you stop and let them pass, and there's signs on the side of the road, but they should be more frequent.
And that applies to bikes as well.
Yeah,
Because
cyclists
cars
as well.
do stop more than bikes do.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that comes under your remit or not, because that is a big issue, actually, is road usage.
I've heard
But I don't
of
know if
people
it-
being delayed over an hour going,
You know, it
certainly on
really
Malt,
is a
actually,
big problem.
interestingly. Yeah,
But
I
I
think
think
the
it's
first
maybe
one,
something
because-
we need to address locally.
We could have a summit meeting on the Isle of Mull at the height of the tourist season, and then parliamentarians and government officials can come and see for themselves.
Be late.
You will be late. You will be late. You will say, oh my God, there's only room for 4 cars in a passing place and we've got to get 24 in.
Well, what I can ask what your ideas are about consultation.
We've announced, and I'm still to get back to the Minister on scope and time scale, but my working assumption is that we're actually going to engage through the whole process, and that consultation would be towards the end of the process, so the engagement would inform what would go into the informal consultation.
Right, and would that be done online, or would you go places, or would
I think that was one of the questions that I
meetings,
started with in my opening, was
Yeah,
happy
but-
to hear from you what you would find most useful.
Well,
I imagine it would be a mix, but open to.
I think, for what it's worth, we moved to Barra 3 years ago, and before that, well, we had quite a lot of contact with Tyree, so we did have ideas about islands, and we were prepared for the move and all that kind of thing. But if it had been for that, I don't think we would have had a Scooby what people we were talking about, and I think there's a lot to be said for going and seeing, and talking to people there.
I'm just going to move on to the next set of questions. Respectfully is, we've looked at the needs, but now actually trying to find the solutions, and actually we've possibly already covered that on a few of these. We've certainly into thinking, I think I could move over there, and a review of existing policies. If that's okay? Yeah. So we're already ahead of the game then. But actually looking at how we can provide easier access to transport for people in rural communities, how we can get better connectivity and integration between public transport providers, how lifeline services can be prioritised, how we can provide rural-centric services and infrastructure over urban interconnectivity. Still like that one. How low carbon options, there are some ideas there of CalMac allowing recycling free, which I'll put up, and how we can educate rural non-road users. That's really small, which I will. So, any ideas on that one?
On the basis of carbon, you could actually say you can't have a faster service between Edinburgh and Glasgow that's going to use more carbon. You can have one if it uses less carbon, and take that into account in it. And if it's a timber truck road, then that would be big plus points, because that would then enable you to actually do something that was not going to be so carbon efficient.
And in fact, the forestry sector is the only carbon sink in Scotland's climate change budget. Sorry, we win.
Yeah, it's the trees sort of do that over the lifetime of the crop growing and offset the removal. But
and also railways are lower carbon than motorways.
Yeah, hugely so.
Or electric cars are more efficient than diesel, petrol cars.
I must admit, one idea which has always struck me is you see the conveyor belts you get at airports where people stand on them. Why not just put cars on them and maybe sit there and then just pull off when they get to a junction rather than have motorways? If they're all doing 17, why not all do 17? I'm going to put carbon reduction-led development there and ignore the conveyor belt idea. Well, innovative thinking's up there already, so. There's one of them which I should have written down and I've missed it in there somewhere. It was recycling subsidies on ferries.
I think you put that one in. It was also getting your recyclables onto trains because we've got passenger networks that don't take freight and that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
You kept that unacceptable. It's not negotiable.
So train services must take freight.
Well, I didn't see why they couldn't put a little red caboose on the back and fill it up with, pop bottles, empty pop bottles. So.
We had a suggestion a while ago about cycles on trains that we just put the cycles on the side of the train.
No, that's bicycles, not recycles.
No, that's what I'm saying, cycles. So, and somebody else suggested, why don't we put some on the back of the train and drag it on?
Or on the top.
Yeah.
Could we get the people that run buses and the people that run trains to sit down and talk to each other and work out when to meet up with each other?
That happens already.
I believe that has improved
Why are people
recently.
still complaining
I
about
think,
it?
well, to be fair, everybody thinks it's easy to get connectivity between a bus and a train. You've got a bus timetable and you've got a rail timetable. I don't know if there's any penalties for buses running late. I don't know how their system's set up. But it's very important, and you've seen in the press recently that ScotRail are getting a bit of a kicking for poor punctuality. So it's a real huge thing, and everybody wants a train to be on
But
time.
in rural areas, it really matters. If the bus is timetabled to leave 5 minutes before the train gets in, and there's not another bus for a couple of hours, and people are having to wait, that affects people's lives.
I think this comes back to what's written there about lifeline services must be prioritised.
That's right. So we're now at the stage of what could be done, and all I was suggesting was that maybe, but obviously not.
Well, the Scottish Government do want connectivity between different modes of transport.
So
it's not a theoretical thing, this is people.
Yeah, and I've been sat at a ferry terminal waiting with no transport options and nowhere to go effectively before.
So what you want to put people at the heart of it, is that right? Well, if that's I'm just trying to be actually practical and concrete and stable. How do we actually help people in their lives and people that actually live in these especially really remote places, that if the things joined up, and I kind of maybe wrongly assumed that the way to get that to happen would be for people to sit down and joint plan and talk, but that's maybe nice.
No, but they do. I mean, they do. It's just, this falls very neatly into the category of if it was easy, we would do it. It's very, very difficult.
It's very difficult when you're working with aged, old, constrained infrastructure.
But there's all sorts of things. From our perspective, one of the biggest challenges is that buses and trains and ourselves all operate to different performance regimes. The Traffic Commissioner said she would not let a bus, the late arrival of another mode of transport knocking onto a bus be acceptable as an excuse.
So that's the thing that needs to be changed.
Yeah, and somebody made the point, we will wait for a late train, but a train won't wait for us. Now that's for very good reasons, because they're on a fixed network, and if they miss their slot further and further down the line and someone doesn't come in, there are other penalties and things. So it's just, I think everybody would love it to happen, but it's just really, really difficult.
I think that as I say, the vitality of the service actually is when you the connection between these remote rural services which aren't regularly serviced. If a bus or a train is delayed for 5 or 10 minutes, it's not going to. It's an inconvenience. Whereas, if you miss your ferry, you're stranded overnight. You're not going to get back to, in my case, pigs and a dog and cat, and God knows what else. dictates my life. But you've actually got you've got quality of life over vital lifeline services, and that's, I think, something which people don't realise. But
this thing about if everyone's judged to different standards, maybe there's something that can be done about that. I have a son who lives in Austria, and I appreciate that they don't have fails.
So maintenance to increase capacity, you can't increase capacity without increasing maintenance, and the end way of doing that is actually to start investing in infrastructure in the first place, which would give you capacity to possibly maintain one line.
So investment,
My personal view around
is investment a thing that could
So
help?
investment in infrastructure.
I think we need a rural deal to counter the city deals.
Yeah, I agree.
Full investment.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this one up and ask you to write down and answer the two questions at the bottom as you as a final thing. So imagine that the strategy's been finished. Okay, all this consultation's gone through, and it's good. It's considered a great way forward. So apart from saying well done to Heather, say why you think that.
She's always applying
what
for a new job.
She's probably off for a drink if she's got it finished. So I'm going to try and write up those last 2 points and get you to think about that, because we're pretty much on time.
Well, I think to be told that all the transport providers had spoken together and that all the services were going to link as far as possible, I think that would be a very good result.
Yes.
You really are just observing, aren't you? You're not going to either.
Since Sunday.
Just on a side note, I was down at my desk earlier, somebody from Creation came up and told us that there's...
But you can save low carbon in this sticker. Yeah. Go and save the world just by saying low carbon.
Is it really literally that you can...
So are you wanting us to write?
Yes, could you write the last ones and put them on literally
the last train?
try and get them as...
Every last train is
Yeah.
waiting for
That's
all
effectively what
the
the
rest
says.
of the buses.
Yeah. You can ignore the rest of it and just...
So we're saying what the success look like?
Why is it viewed as...
The last train...
Imagine transport strategy is finished and it's recorded as a great success.
Why
Why is it viewed this way, and what pleases you about it? So,
people going there.
I don't like that question or how it's worded, but I didn't write it. Well, I did write that. I copied it. I didn't word it.
Which was, I'd say, but it's around the big.
It's interesting how different the two workshops have been and the focus of them. Yeah, entirely.
There's been more numbers in this one as well, so I think
There
that's...
has.
But we
There's
have
been more
weather.
debate, and I think your start was more debating.
We sometimes have weather.
Won't everybody up?
Sometimes if
We'll
you
put it up.
wait because the train has been delayed.
It's an interesting one, and it's what I was saying earlier about transport. It's
You
actually
don't
often
know if it's going
localised.
to be 10 minutes
problems
late
which-
or not come until tomorrow morning.
We also have weather. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a problem. It is a
We
problem.
warmed ourselves up from the last one, but this one, I think.
That's okay. In my experience, the last train is always very good. Everyone is best to the last part of the journeys, maybe later, but always.
I don't, well, we're rural. We've
Right, I think
our
we've
last bus
pretty
has
much
got
getting
cancelled.
into
We don't have last bus.
Have you written your... Sorry, I didn't catch your name at the start. Roddy.
Like
yours.
maybe the service.
It was... you should find them, actually.
Is that it? All 2 stickers out of this whole group?
Seemingly so.
That's appalling.
So, I think more people will put them up as
Not a
they
good
go.
answer.
So, it was that views of rural communities...
Nothing to say. Anybody else got something to say? I've got post-it
On
notes.
board by the transport operators.
Yeah.
Last group had about 10 up there. There's a bit of a challenge here.
And services.
Do you want me to put yours up?
Yeah, well,
It's all right, don't worry, we've got 3 coming in.
More rail freight's gone up there, more rail freight's up.
Yeah, I was totally brainwashed by your compelling stuff strutting.
Well, we could a floating theatre in Ross.
I met the guys who were doing it. They came to our music section and they thoroughly enjoyed it. They said that the specifications were changed, so they had to drill harder and further underwater to meet specs. But they'd done their job and they came to our music session several times. But we still need a little bit of road to get the trucks there.
Yes.
You haven't solved that one, have you?
No, we did some of the road, but we didn't do all of the road.
Right. Biggest community-owned forest in Scotland.
Well, do you have
Is
a
this
demo? It's hiding in the skirt.
Thank you. Is this North Mole?
South.
No,
South Mole.
we've got the two biggest community-owned forests.
I know,
South Mole's a bit bigger. Yeah, yeah, he's the North Mole man.
Being in
Well, he was, he's now retired.
So that's why I don't
thought he
feel like
was,
you know,
but
from
I
March
don't know.
to October.
Yeah,
It is actually
it was not, that was the cause of the argument, but when someone says, I don't care what we agree, this is how it's going to be, you sort of end the conversation.
That's the way to run a workshop.
We can run a community.
Yeah. Anyway, right, well thanks ever so much for your input to this. What I'll now be doing is putting together both sessions, and then tomorrow we've got something going on. Tomorrow we'll be having a session. Now obviously there's only an opportunity to attend one of the sessions tomorrow, but what we'll be looking at is what needs to happen, who can do it, and when does it need to be done by. Now obviously with this specific one, we're looking at the National Transport Strategy. So actually the time scale is pretty much put in. Who can do it is pretty much, again, just liaising with and how that can work with the review of this National Transport Strategy. So what we'll purely be focusing is taking this information, and I'll be trying to collate it this evening. Thank you for all my sins. And trying to put it into actually some action points, which hopefully everyone can take forward in this review of, sorry, not review, it's a review.
It's a review of the existing national transport strategy.
But you said it was different from the last group. Was it contradictory to the last group? Or just a different?
The last group was more talking about increasing capacity. I think it was saying that for rural Scotland to thrive, we need to get more people into rural Scotland, we need to have more happening in rural Scotland. We need to support business and basically get the infrastructure able to cope with that. Tourism was a focus in there because actually it does bring a lot of people to rural Scotland. Whereas this, I think, has been a lot more service focused. And while we touched on the needs of old people, the problems of centralisation of healthcare and bits like that, it was looking at the capacity, I think, in the last session, whereas this session has felt very much more about the lifeline and the public service rather than the possibly more independent service. I think that's, and these guys were in both as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
As a slight overview, I've not got people noticing it, but
Very complimentary. You've got to do both. You've got to sort it all out.
Done your homework for you.
I know.
You just write that in sentences.
Right down
That's
to
your-
the head.
I think I was supposed to say we've committed to do it in the current parliament, but you know we could do that in the current group.